When aspects of a complex case exceed your personal expertise, you bring in a co-counsel to add the specific insight your firm needs for next-level results. Marketing in the legal industry requires complex strategy and insight far beyond anything you learned in law school. Want more for your law firm? Time to bring in a marketing co-counsel. Welcome to CounselCast. I'm your host, Karin Conroy, your marketing co-counsel. In every episode, I discuss marketing topics with experts who answer your questions and help your firm achieve more. Here's today's guest.
Hi, I'm Scott Pruim with Domain Technology Partners, and looking forward to our little chat.
Hi, Scott. So glad to talk to you about this stuff today. I feel like IT, security, technology, it's all, for a lot of lawyers, the big, confusing gray box. And
Sure.
so the big question we're going to ask today, and then we have a lot of sub questions that feed from there, but why shouldn't I DIY my IT? Why should I not just buy everything off of Amazon or go to Best Buy or Google it?
Right.
Why need your expertise?
Probably some of the same reasons that you shouldn't DIY building a deck or fixing a floor yourself before you've actually done it, because it's not as easy as it looks sometimes. And specifically with a lot of the prospects and clients that we've brought on who have thought that in the past or maybe gone that route, it's not as easy as, like you had just said, buying, a firewall off of Amazon, plugging it in and linking to it and hoping it does what it's supposed to do. Because inside of that firewall, there are 8,000 different things you can check to change settings to make sure things are done a certain way. And if you just buy it and plug it in, it's not like your TV, which may at this point just pull up every channel that you have.
Right.
The firewall isn't going to do what it's supposed to do. So there's some good reasons why you shouldn't DIY a lot of things, but specifically IT and security, it is complicated. So unless you have some long-standing experience with it, or you've watched a lot of YouTube, and even then it's not going to help, you'll get in trouble. And that's what it boils down to.
I can watch YouTube videos all day long on how to color my hair, but I'm not going to do it well. It's going to be a nightmare. And the repercussions are not something I'm willing to live with. So what
Correct.
Are the stories you have of like clients where, it's probably where they've come to you and either they've started by DIY or they had a different firm that wasn't,
right,
quite checking all the boxes, or what are some good stories you have where the risk was not averted?
Right. Yep. And a little bit like your hair, like you said, you may not want to live with it, but you probably can live with your hair being a different color as long as it doesn't fall out. On the IT side, there have been a few clients who have done a little bit of that a mix of both of those things, kind of done it themselves, or had, a break fix kind of person in there that set things up and then just walked away. And it's everything you hear about on the news. It's hacks, it's 0-day things. It's people getting into trouble by clicking on a link in an email that they thought was from their boss, which if they looked a little more closely, instead of Yahoo, it said Yahoo with a U.com. And people click on those things because they just don't know. And it opens the door to people to get in there. And we've had a few clients who have gotten close to ransomware and things like that because they've left ports open on the back end, or people have clicked on things they shouldn't have clicked on. And luckily we've gotten to them in time, because we generally come in and before we even talk about the future, we do an assessment and see where they're currently at. Because we have basically what we see as a minimum viability for clients. If they're not at a certain level, we almost just won't work with them, and we have to get them to that level. But on the other side, the extreme side, there are some bits of people who have had intruders in their system. No one's been taken for, money or had their system shut down, but their information is out there. And depending on what the business is, it gets tricky.
Yeah. So what kind of things? So I know when we start with clients, we're looking at, the website security and the potential issues and holes and everything just that surround the website. And
right.
Maybe their email. But what other kind of things are you looking at when you do that initial evaluation and figure out where they're at, where their baseline is? What other things are you looking at?
So the big ones are firewalls and servers. It's kind of the easy starting point just to see where they are. If they have a firewall in place, great. but how old is it? Is it from 2000? Because firewalls these days may last 2 years before they need to be kind of either reconfigured or just a new one needs to be bought. Same with servers that last a little longer. Outside of that, we look at everything from their email filter contouring, their web filter contouring content, and kind of see how things are being used, who's going where, what security aspects are involved in that. And then the business line applications. So they could be using QuickBooks Online or a number of random different apps that I won't go into that have access to outside servers, but that also could allow people into their systems. So we really want to get a snapshot where they are currently, how everything's being used. And then we come back and say, before we'd even consider, and it's a hard conversation sometimes because we're in sales, we want to sell things, but we want relationships. And it's hard to say, before we even think about working with you, you need to get to this level, or you have a server from 2003 that just isn't going to cut it for us. And it's hard to turn away business like that, but it saves us so much time and hassle and heartache in the long run of having to fix those things once we got into it.
We've learned that lesson some hard way too. I've had clients who come to me with a website that's like 12 years old. It's still they always use the word, we just refresh it a little bit.
Right.
We kind of clean it up. We don't need a whole thing. And I'm like, yeah, you do. And just refreshing something that's 12 years old, it's like trying to take an ancient car and just like fine tune the brakes a little bit when everything else is rusting and falling apart. And you're ignoring the bigger problem.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think your website analogy is probably spot on for the same things that we deal with. They may say refresh, but they really don't know how many other things are involved in what that refresh would actually be.
Yeah. And at some point, I use the analogy of an old house all the time. I'm like, listen, it's not in either of our best interests. First of all, this isn't like a cute old house. It has like, features that we want to keep. This is an old house that you walk into and the wiring and the plumbing and the walls are falling down and you're asking me to put in some nice windows. And that's not going to give you any long-term benefit. We just need a bulldozer. Like start over and, get you up to where things need to be. Let's just take a look at how much money you've spent over the last 12 years on this website. Good for you. You have kept that budget tight. Let's move on and put some money in whatever. When you talk about Firewall, that is one of those deer in the headlights term.
Right.
People see, my clients anyway, typically hear about the firewalls when it's stopping them from doing something they want to do. So firewall on the good side, what is it supposed to do? And how does that work in terms of when it's set up correctly?
Sure.
Doing its jobs.
Right. And so simply put, the firewall accomplishes two things. It checks things coming into your site or into your people from the outside, but it also checks your people on the inside going out to things. So the easiest way to think about it is when it's working correctly and when it's set up correctly, you think of it as kind of a sandbox. So someone needs to go out to a site. They'll type in whatever site they're going to, and in milliseconds, a little sandbox is set up where the firewall goes into that site, plays around it, and see if it's a good site or if it's malicious, and does all the kind of fun things. But before you even know it, comes back and says, you shouldn't be at this site, or this site's fine, and takes you right to it without you even knowing any of that happened. So it's kind of a little virtual world where everything is figured out and checked out. And when it's working correctly, you can set it up so that your people can't go to YouTube or can't go to Facebook, all the fun stuff that people want to do. But maybe
see it the most often. They're like, I'm trying to
right.
post on Instagram in the middle of my work day.
Right. It's not working. Yeah. And it's not that those sites are bad. That's a time use issue that the company had. So that's one thing. The other thing is them going to a site that they think may be perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But it's mining information or it's allowing access to things that it shouldn't. And again, that's the stuff that your people or the employees of that company just should never even know is happening. It's because it's all happening in the background and it's happening quicker than they know. Same with things coming into your company, whether that's email, content filtering or things like that. It's checking all those things. Like when we specifically on our devices, when we get a link from somebody, I click that link. There's a couple of things. One, it's training them that not to click certain things. But even if it's a good, reputable contact that's sending me the link, our machine checks the link, goes in, plays it, see if it's actually good or malicious, comes back and says everything's fine. It takes you to that link. So those little things all happen in a split second, but they keep you from a lot of trouble. And some of that stuff, it's not just you buy it from Best Buy. No, you can't buy it from Best Buy, but somewhere like that, Amazon, and you plug it in and connect your network to it and think everything's going to be fine. Yeah. There are lots of boxes to check, lots of things to go through. And if you're just, like you said, if you're just DIYing it, you may pick up on 80 or 90% of it, and that's great. But that 10% is what's going to get you in a lot of trouble.
It leaves you a huge hole. And that goes right into another question that I wrote down is why we should care about hackers. I have a lot of lawyers and things that think, oh, I'm just, this law firm, I'm not selling anything, I don't collect credit cards. Why would they care about my site? Why would they care about my emails? And this happens to my firms all the time. And I feel like this ties right into that firewall because it's the other side of it. It's when things go bad and their sites get hacked and there's malware on there, then all of a sudden there's this block. And so talk about for a minute about how that works and how if things go bad, and either their firewall isn't set up right or for whatever reason someone gets in. First of all, why do people care about that?
Sure.
Getting in, and then how does that work, and what's the risk of all of that? What's the impact?
Right, and you can kind of answer both in the same way. The reason it's bad is, maybe they're not setting up ransomware, and they're not gonna shut down your system and say it'll be easy money, $10,000 to get everything back.
Yeah,
there could be a lot, especially legal firms. There could be a lot of personally identifiable information on there. That one, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm sure there's some legal aspects to letting that information out. So when you think, we don't have anything that's important to people, or we're not worried about losing information, one, that's probably a bad mindset. But two, there are a lot of ramifications to that because somebody can get in and whether they do anything or not, it's happened a few times with some larger companies. They just sit in the system for months on end and either wait for something that comes up that they'd like to see, or, on the dark web, shop that entry to anybody that may want something to do with it. So it's complicated, but it's also simple in the fact that you just don't want that stuff happening, no matter if you think it's important or not, because maybe it's not important for you, but one of your clients might have information on there that they certainly don't want out, and somebody could.
And they have a legal obligation to protect that information.
Correct.
So on some level, there are responsibilities just on a professional level that they need to, keep up. I've actually seen clients where they've just let it go. They think their website and their email is just not a major part of the way they're getting business, so they don't pay attention. And all of a sudden, they got malware. I had one client where we went to their website and it was the flag of Ukraine, like just waving, like GIF or GIF, however people like.
Right.
And just the flag of Ukraine, like basically we have taken possession of your website.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, how does this happen? And I've had clients like sexual harassment law.
Right.
Their sites are for sure a target because they've got certain keywords in there that are being pulled by hackers. And if their sites aren't updated and locked down, then this is what I usually tell them that all of a sudden gets to their heart. Your emails are at risk. So all of emails won't send. And then they're like, oh, that's a problem. Like if I'm sending an email that has some sort of a, legal document attached,
right,
I need that thing to go through. I need to make sure. So that's usually where I kind of make sure that I'm really getting the importance of it across.
Right. And that goes into what we generally talk about. I mean, the one thing when you said, we talked earlier about websites, like when I'm looking at this right now, the website we're on, there's a little lock on the top, and that's the SSL. And there are sites you can go to, some pretty interesting new sites, not major businesses, but people that have created, they don't have that. And that's just, it's an open door basically. But on the other hand, when you talk about emails, once we get into conversations with companies or prospects, we talk about RTO and RPO, which is recovery time objective and recovery point objective. So the first one, the time is, if your system is hacked or your system goes down, how long is it going to take, or how long do you need it? Can't you have it be before you get back up and running? And that could be 6 hours. It could be 2 hours. It could be a minute, which is important. And then for legal firms, recovery point objective is, if that happens, how much information are you willing to lose? Kind of like when if you have an iPhone or whatever phone, when it backs up, usually we all do it at night when we're sleeping, and it's backing up that day. So if anything happened, we'd lose a day. Some companies can't handle that. They probably can't handle losing an hour's worth of information, depending on what it is. So again, those are the little intricacies and things that, if you're just doing it yourself, you may not think about, but those are settings and those are things you need to look at.
And you see major hacks with major companies all the time, and they are spending millions of dollars to get the data recovered. And that goes to show you what the value is of the missing data and that recovery time.
Right.
About where it is cheaper for them to spend those millions of dollars to recover it than to go any longer without it. So,
yes, which is insane.
Yeah, it's not like your website are just sitting there without value. And,
right.
All of a sudden, when it's gone, you realize, oh my gosh, this is worth some giant number.
Right.
And I could have spent some smaller number to protect this initially. But now I get it.
Yeah. And, again, all these little things that you may, or not you, but people may or may not think about do pop up, and they're important. I can lose text messages from my buddies talking about when the next game night is, because they'll probably send them again, but I don't want to lose, my car payment information or things like that. So there's definitely a line.
And coming back to lawyers, like they legally cannot lose their client's data and their information.
Right.
I mean, they have to be on top of those. Those are all legal documents. They have to have some kind of a security setting. I've seen articles that talk about how it's malpractice if you don't have, some level of security set up.
Sure.
It's like leaving your office without a lock. And that like the cleaning people are going to be okay. And you're just kind of doing all of the, that's just, no one would think that's okay, but this is at a much higher level because anyone has access to your office that, knows how to get in, hack the website.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Right.
Your servers.
Right. And it's the same old thing as everybody always says, we and the companies always have to be on, and it just takes one hacker, one time, and they're in.
Well, and from our side, from a website side, is much more simple because we are constantly backing up a website. We have at least a month's worth of a website backed up at any given time on an on-site location. Whereas you're talking about like their files and all of the data on their computer that they could potentially get in command. And if that stuff is gone, they're, and they haven't backed that up. Right. Such a huge problem. And so that's where I think a lot of these hackers really get in. And that's a whole other level of that, where they really need to, I think, need to bring in firms like yours to help them add that extra layer of security and keep it up to date. The thing we haven't talked about is this stuff changes every hour. I mean, from, everywhere, and they're finding new ways in all the time.
Right. Yeah. And it does. It's like, I think we talked about firewalls, you used to be able to have them for 5 years or so. Now, 12 months, maybe 24, if you're lucky. Cause it's just constantly changing, and it's all artificial intelligence. And those are some of the best firewalls now that are ones that actually learn as things go on. So,
yeah, I think about all the time when I'm going through TSA and, we're still taking our shoes off.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about, it's not a security process. It's a public kind of management of panic process.
Right.
Because who thinks that shoe bomber, how was that? 15 or so?
At least. Yeah.
Why would they keep choosing the same method of attack? And so same thing for these hackers. They're not going to continue to keep choosing the same method of attack. You have to continually reposition it. So these security methods that we see from the public side, from whether it's TSA or whatever, a lot of those are just trying to keep people down
Sure.
I don't think they really feel like there's a massive risk that something's going to happen in someone's again. They've already
Right.
got that kind of nailed down. Like that.
Yeah. And that works really well with firewalls as well, because while there's still maybe someone out there who all he or she can do is use a shoe bomb, there are other steps that are in place now in security that will pick that up without them having to take their, like, I'm TSA pre, so I don't take my shoe off. Something else is picking that up if I've got a shoe bomb in there. So yeah.
Exactly. But there's other guys who are not those basic hackers that are constantly trying to find
Right.
different ways in. And when
Yep.
you're talking about technology, it's a lot easier than, something like a terrorist attack.
Yes.
You're actually physically having to figure things out versus
Right.
finding hacks into servers like that.
Yeah. And it's the old line about guys who are in jail. All they do is sit around and think about ways to get out.
Yeah.
And hackers, all they're doing is sitting around thinking about ways to get in. So they're going to come up with something that we haven't thought of before, and we'll have to react to it.
So to the big question I get asked all the time. So why do they want to get in? I know there's some of these guys who go on the dark web and they're going to sell your information.
Right.
And I had a firm a few years ago that got the fax asking for Bitcoin and all of that. And
Yep.
it was in relation to the website. So we were like, okay. But aside from those guys who are asking for the Bitcoin, why do hackers continually try to, especially malware? Nobody understands this. Why are they doing that?
Part of it is just that. It's just the learning aspect of it and trying to figure out what works and what won't work for maybe sometimes a bigger project down the line.
Yeah.
Or specifically for fun. I know it sounds weird, but a lot of it's for fun. And then, to your point earlier, they go onto the dark web and they can sell whatever they've come up with to somebody else. Whether that was their intention or not from the beginning, that's where it ends up. And we do free, well, it doesn't matter if it's free, but we do dark web scans for companies.
Oh, wow.
And we'll put a company in there, maybe or some individual email addresses. And I did it with the company I used to be with. And I had passwords that popped up on there from things that I'd used a long time ago.
Wow.
And it's just constantly getting collected. And again, whether somebody sees it or uses it or not isn't always the point. It's just out there. So the more you can protect, the better.
Yeah. It's kind of like graffiti. Like you look at it and you're like, what is the point of that? And it's just sort of like, we're just criminals.
Yep. And almost it boils down to that. Some of them are artists, but most of them are just, they're doing it for fun.
100%.
Yeah. Not only doing it for fun, but doing it because they can get away with it. Only the good ones. Only the good ones.
Exactly. That's right. You were artistic criminals.
Correct.
Bring it all together.
Correct.
Awesome. Well, that was super helpful. So I love to ask people what they are reading. I'm an avid reader, and we're putting together a nice library on the website where we're talking about everybody's books and everything. So Scott, tell us either what you're reading or a great book that you can recommend.
So I think both. And I believe this is the second time I'm reading. I hope it hasn't been more than that. But it's a book called Into Thin Air. And it's, about 1996 and the expedition of some of these guys to Everest. And the stuff that happened the single deadliest day on Everest, maybe still, but it's well written. And then it's also just some very interesting stories about the people who were there, how things were done. And kind of to our point, and I think the way I always bring books back to what I'm doing is you don't know what you don't know. So you almost always need someone who is going to guide you. And in this case, they're Sherpas, obviously, but they're guides who went up and they were the best at what they did. And some of those guys didn't make it back either. So you never know what's out there. But you have to be able to deal with it and adapt to it and handle it. But it's just a great, one sad, but it's just a great book. So
that's such a good analogy too. I mean, I really live by that idea that I don't know what I don't know. And also someone, whenever I'm trying to accomplish something, whether it's even just like having someone come and clean my house or whatever it is, there's someone who probably specializes in this thing.
Right.
That is thinking about 10 extra things that I haven't even considered. And especially when it comes to security and these things that have all this major risk involved, it's important to kind of consider the fact that, you're going to not just not know things, but you're going to fall into some pretty big holes if,
Right.
Do this the right way. But I love kind of putting the whole Everest, like the visuals of climbing the mountain and the Sherpas, kind of knowing what they know. Like
Exactly.
like such a really cool, like visual image along with the idea of climbing the mountain of security.
Yeah. And then to take it one step too far, probably the things that can happen if you don't do what you're supposed to do, and
Exactly.
the mountain will kill you. One way or the other, it'll kill you. So
Yeah, I don't really have any interest in climbing Mount Everest like that. I feel like I know about too many people dying that way.
yeah, then I think I would like to do it the adventurous side. It's the $60,000 side just to actually do it. It hurts a little bit too, and the months that you need to not only prepare but to actually do the endeavor. So yeah, there's some roadblocks in the way.
Yeah. So I know a lot of people that like hike to base camp. Do you know enough about? So does this book goes past that, right? It goes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah, and that's again, it kind of all level comes into what we've been talking about. Just getting to base camp sometimes is hard enough, but then they stay at base camp to acclimate, and some of them decide I don't want to go any further. Yeah, this is my level, and you people are crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, so it gets into a lot of that, and some of those were the lucky ones that made it. But then it's not only getting up to the top of Everest, which you get to stay there for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, maybe. You got to make it all the way back down, which is almost harder sometimes than making your way up there. No, no elevator, no air, and just a lot of horrible conditions. So sounds great. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Give me a beach.
I'm my 60 grand over right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. All right. Well, Scott, thank you so much for your input. I feel like it's super valuable. I think with IT and security, there are a lot of big questions, and people don't, number one, think they can DIY it. And number two, they just don't really understand it. And so it's helpful to understand the risks and, why they need to kind of bring that expert in to really get it done right. So I appreciate your time, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for listening to this episode on the CounselCast podcast. I know that by implementing what you heard today, your law firm will achieve more. Be sure to visit the website at counsel-cast.com for the resources mentioned on this episode. If you enjoyed the episode, I would appreciate it if you could rate and review the podcast on Apple and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. See you on the next one.